Thank you, Teresa. So I'll go ahead and share them, and please give me the hook if you need for me to.
So do you see the slide?
I do.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction, Teresa. It's a real pleasure and a great opportunity to speak with you all a little bit about the City of Carlsbad's Emergency Operations Center. Josh is fairly familiar with it, being a Carlsbad Community Emergency Response Team member. But Josh, even so, as we get towards the end of this presentation, you'll see the new changes, mostly driven by technologies that we've implemented and are in the process of implementing in our Emergency Operations Center. So I did want to talk about two phases of emergency response. One is the Pre-Emergency Operations Center, or EOC Activation. That is where a number of us at the city are monitoring the hazard environment, largely weather, to see if there's anything that could create any public safety issues for the community. And the second phase is once we have a hazard that's threatening life, property, the environment, activating our Emergency Operations Center to respond to those hazards and the impacts to the community. So John, you can hit the next slide. I'm going to be talking about a number of these applications and other technologies. I'll introduce a few of them first, and then I'll explain them in the EOC environment, and I'll show you how we use these in the Emergency Operations Center environment. So just briefly, some of the technologies I'll be talking about, some of them originate or are managed by San Diego Gas and Electric. San Diego Gas and Electric has invested millions and millions of dollars in emergency management since the earlier fires in 2000. They have developed a fire potential index. I'm going to show you that. They have partnered with the UCSD and HP-REN camera system, which are used for fire awareness, fire spotting. They have over 170 weather stations throughout San Diego County, which give us really microclimate information that's very, very helpful during Santa Ana conditions. We use an application called Tablet Command. That command is licensed. You need user ID and password to access. But I'll show you that. And we certainly use social media for situational awareness, an application called Scout, which is being perhaps improved upon by a Esri-based product called Intterra. I'll talk more about that. A older technology called WebEOC, which is how we communicate with the other jurisdictions in the county. Traffic Management Center cameras within Carlsbad. We have a number of these cameras, 160 or 70 throughout the city to monitor traffic flow. We can use them for situational awareness during large-scale disasters, particularly the evacuation process. Video cameras, I'll talk about some of what we use in the City of Carlsbad, but I'm not going to go into all the details related to law enforcement uses of video cameras. Some of the apps that we use, there is a generally available app to the general population called PulsePoint. It's useful for situational awareness related to fire department calls, responses to incidents. And there's the SDGE app, which we'll talk about power outages and those types of things. We monitor CAL FIRE, the weather system, earthquake activity, the county. We communicate using WhatsApp, and Kitty Hawk is our dashboard where the drone cameras are displayed. So those are some of the technologies I'm going to run through real quickly before we jump into the EOC and see how they're used in the Emergency Operations Center. So John, if you go to the next. This first slide gives you a screenshot of San Diego Gas and Electric's Fire Potential Index. We get this on a daily basis about noon. You can see in the columns marked at the top that today, Tuesday, 9/15, You can see across San Diego County what the fire potential is based on all of those meteorological stations in San Diego County. They are looking at data like temperature and wind speed and relative humidity and the moisture contents of the vegetation to come up what is the potential is for spark or open flames growing, expanding into these large-scale conflagrations. If you look at the rows, you'll see a NC row. That is really the North County, North Coastal zone that most of Carlsbad is in. The eastern parts of Carlsbad is in the NE zone. So we monitor this on a daily basis to get a sense of what our fire potential index is. When things move into the higher levels of elevated condition or into the extreme conditions, we have pre-planned responses that we start to take in the city, driven by the Emergency Operations Center. But this is a very useful tool. Back in 2018, 2019, along the coastal strip, it only went red 3, maybe 4 times throughout the year. And we really pay close attention when that's the case. It did go red in December, I think it was 7th, 2017, or when the Lilac fire occurred in North County. So we knew that the conditions were right for that one. And as I said, we take pre-planned responses. It's a very useful tool. It's been around for perhaps 4 years or so now. John, next. This is a series of cameras that's called the SDGE fire cameras, but it really is based on UCSD's HP REN camera system. We can click on cameras to get visual confirmation of smoke plumes and those types of things, but the point tilt zoom feature is really controlled by San Diego Gas and Electric, CAL FIRE, and UCSD. Next. This is SDGE's weather website. You can go to it. It's sdgeweather.com. It's very useful because it displays the fire potential index, wind speeds and wind gust speeds, current temperatures, relative humidity, and those types of things that are important components to that equation that determines the fire potential index. John, next. So side by side, we have 2 applications that we use. On the left is tablet command. You see in the white box, it says TC. On the right is PulsePoint. PulsePoint to the right, anyone can download on their iPhone and monitor a fire department's calls. So you can see in the red row at the top that CFD, Carlsbad Fire Department, is the selected agency. And when I did this screenshot yesterday or at some point, you can see that we were responding largely to medical calls. And medical calls make up the great majority, into the 90 percentile of calls that the fire departments respond to. But when Santa Ana conditions are present, we're monitoring this for any vegetation fire calls. On the left, which once again is licensed, you need a user password and ID to access. It's not just a single agency presentation, but North County presentation. So we can see calls across the North County jurisdictions. And this is particularly important during wildfire season because we can see where these vegetation fires start. And we had tablet command up in the EOC displayed, and when the Lilac fire vegetation fire broke out. We first got the notification within that first 911 call on tablet command. So we really knew immediately when that fire had started, and we watched its development. We did our pre-planned responses, and ultimately, as I'll show you a little bit later in the presentation, we prepared to house the evacuees from those neighboring jurisdictions. Next, John. Side by side here, we have 2 other map-based applications, both web-based applications. One is called Scout, the other one is called Intterra. Scout started out as a project with Lincoln Labs, MIT, and there were some folks in San Diego County that were active in the development of the Scout software. I've never been challenged on this statement, so I'll say it with about 90% confidence. Carlsbad used Scout, its predecessor, NICS, the project, very effectively during the Poinsettia fire in 2014. And we used it to share real-time information between the incident command posts in the field and the EOC providing support. And then we kind of briefed the use, and that in addition to the 300 or more times it had been used by CAL FIRE at the field level, just at the field level, it contributed to the state of California deciding to develop this into a program, a funded program. They renamed the initial project NICS. Scouts, Carlsbad and Carlsbad CERT did some of the beta testing for this in our Emergency Operations Center. And it's been a very useful tool over the years. But it's not an Esri-based product. Esri has more capability when it comes to GIS, displays and tools. And so over the years, more jurisdictions, including CAL FIRE, are also using other Esri-based products. And that's what you see on the right. It's an Esri-based product called Intterra. And the picture you see is the Valley Fire from last week and 2 weeks ago. So the advantage of these systems is it really integrates the responders in the field to the support level, so we have integrated response support real time. The other point I'd like to make about Scout is that when we used it in the Poinsettia fire, we had that red line, that's the fire perimeter of, and it's not 100% correct, it's the initial fire perimeter for the Poinsettia fire. And you can see from the timestamps, it's probably hard to see. We had it in our Emergency Operations Center in under 2 hours. And I'm not here to criticize, but I do want to share for comparison purposes that when the county wrote up their after action report for that series of 14 fires over that May 14th, 15th, 16th period, they didn't have a fire perimeter for the first few days. So there's an order of magnitude change here that technology has brought to our situational awareness about where that fire is, where it's progressing, and how we should evacuate. So I'll show you a little bit more about this in some future slides, how we use it in the EOC. So John, we could move on. This other slide shows an application called WebEOC. It's been around for since the shortly after the 2003 fire, so maybe 2005. There's another product that was being used in the county before that, E-Team. WebEOC was a little bit simpler to use. It really connects the local jurisdictions and other agencies in with the county. And so I'd say it's somewhat like a bicycle wheel hub and spoke, where the county's at the center, kind of managing the information flow, and the jurisdictions and agencies are feeding it into the county, and the county shares it back out in these regional significant events boards. On the left-hand side, you can see how it's been used for COVID-19, and on the right hand side, you can see how it's being used in the Valley Fire. You can shift between these windows. The disadvantage is, you can see, it's not a map-based system, it's a text-based system. After a couple rows of information, it kind of flows off the screen, and then you have to shift from essentially back and forth between windows to get the information. And when these things are fast-paced and very dynamic, it's often text information sharing isn't the best way to share information. Pictures help a lot. John, next slide. This is a screenshot of the city's traffic management center system cameras. We have, I don't know, 150, 160 of these cameras throughout the city of Carlsbad. We certainly use them on a daily basis to manage commute and traffic and those types of things. But during emergencies, we use them to manage our evacuation flow. We want to know where the choke points are developing and things like that. I'll talk a little bit about this in a future slide as well. I just want to introduce the technology here. But on the left-hand side, you can see that our traffic management unit leader there is monitoring the development of choke points as we're evacuating sectors in Carlsbad, then driven by Thomas Brother Grid Square evacuations. But you can see in the foreground of the individual in the orange vest, a CERT member, his name is John Evans, managing the the NICS application, which later became Scout. And you can see that he's working that fire perimeter, and we were evacuating using Thomas Brother grid squares to meter our evacuation, because the worst mistake you can make is to not evacuate those that need to be evacuated. But the opposite mistake you can make is over evacuating, getting too many people on the road, creating a congestion and put them in a hazardous potential position of burnover. And you've probably seen that in other areas during these large fires. Next slide, please. Carlsbad Police Department does have a number of video cameras mounted and mobile drones. The left-hand picture is the Kitty Hawk app that we use, fire uses, I misspoke, Carlsbad Police Department uses, we use it in the Emergency Operations Center. I didn't want to share any of Carlsbad PD law enforcement pictures of drone use, but I just pulled from the internet a picture of a San Diego Union Tribune of San Diego Sheriff's Office. I'll talk a little bit about TPD drone use if you'd like, but I just didn't want to pull any pictures into today's presentation. Next slide. This is a picture of the public safety, meaning Carlsbad PD, Carlsbad Fire Mobile Command Vehicle. We can set up an alternate EOC in this. Oftentimes we locate it to support the incident command post in the field. It has a lot of technology in it. A lot of the technology is technology used to create the situational awareness that's then shared back and communicated electronically with the Emergency Operations Center. And we've been using this more and more over the years. The city's had this, so maybe 5-6 years now. Next slide, please. Sometimes we activate our emergency operations based on information that we get through mobile phone, mobile apps, and you can just see, I think it's Shake Alert and MyShake pictures here. A while back, I'll show you some slides once we get into the EOC portion of how we've used this these types of information in the emergency operation. But we do use mobile phone apps to help create situational awareness, help us decide when we need to activate our EOC. Next slide, please. We also use social media feedback. This is a tool called Zen City. City's been using this for just about a year now. It helps us understand how these larger scale incidents are triggering community feedback. I have all identity blocked out, so I don't know who the individuals are contributing to this, but it gives us a sense of how our community is responding. Others might use it on a daily basis. We just largely use it to see how residents are responding to incidents, COVID or disasters, that type of thing. This app had a predecessor called Geophedia. I'm going to show you a picture of Geophedia and how we used it for real-time information sharing during a disaster in a minute. Next slide, please. I also have the benefit of having CERT team text inputs during large-scale disaster. On the right is actually it's a video, but a screenshot of a video of flooding that was occurring in Agua Hedionda Creek that runs through Rancho Carlsbad. There are certain homes, that is a flood zone, largely, part of it is anyway, and some of the homes are close to the banks of Agua Hedionda Creek. So CERT team members keep me informed on the levels of the creek, and just back on April 10th, we had actually flooding from a different source in Agua in Rancho Carlsbad, and we're able to respond based on this type of input from residents and particularly CERT team members or other emergency response teams that are affiliated with our CERT program. Next slide. So when we virtually activate our emergency operations center, and by that we turn on all the technology, all the electronics, we connect to the various information sources relevant to that incident. We call this a virtual activation. It's a pre-staffed activation. And so when we get some weather reports, or if we get some earthquake shake alert reports, like there might be an earthquake swarm developing in the Salton Sea, this is what our Emergency Operations Center looks like. We've kind of pre-activated it to make sure that we're collecting information so that when we staff activate, we have information for decision making, and we're not lighting things off and trying to figure out what's going on at that point. It saves a lot of time doing this. It's all about time compression. We want to be able to respond quickly. We've all seen what happens when we don't respond quickly to these quickly developing emergencies. I'll walk you around the EOC real quickly. On the left-hand side, you'll just see those San Diego Gas and Electric fire cameras that I showed you earlier. In the center, moving right, you'll see a scout picture being displayed. To the right of that, you'll see PulsePoint displayed. And moving over to the right-hand side, you'll see WebEOC displayed in the EOC. Below WebEOC, in the smaller monitor, you'll see San Diego Gas and Electric Weather. And then just above that, we have a city-developed app. It was developed by Bob Welty, who's a Ready Carlsbad Insert member, and it helps us track city staff during these large-scale disasters. Next, please. And so this is just an example of an EOC virtual activation during an earthquake swarm. You can see that there was activity in the vicinity of the Salton Sea. There's a screenshot of that in the lower left-hand corner. If you move directly vertical of that, above that, you'll see a spike in a line graph, and that is a spike in the earthquake activity, the swarm activity, building swarm activity. It's also shown in the graph to the right. And we're monitoring this for situational awareness. And there's no consensus between scientists, geologists, subject matter experts on whether earthquake swarms predict larger earthquake activity or whether they're actually venting the pressure from earthquakes. But nevertheless, we monitor it, so we're prepared to activate should we have a large quake associated with that. And just walking you through the EOC again, we're monitoring the earthquake swarms, some USGS sites. We have traffic management cameras up and some other resources there. So we can move through with the next slide, John. So I've been with the city a little over 13 years, and in that 13-year period, we've really transitioned our EOC posture, if you will, from a paper-oriented EOC into electronic-oriented in an EOC. If we do have paper documents, they're electronic, converted to electronic, and just like you have in your minutes, we have all our hypertext links associated with those texts. And the second thing that we've done is we've shifted from the traditional position-focused EOC, and we have positions in our EOC that are defined by the Incident Command System, which is a nationally adopted system for organizing incident response. And what would traditionally happen, and still happens in many EOCs, is that when staff report to the EOC, they open up their notebook and then they go through their individual position checklist. And that's okay for getting them prepared to do their individual job. But we changed our paradigm. We changed our method of doing things, and we don't focus on individual position response. It's not what the fire rescue branch director is doing. It's what we're doing collectively to complete tasks to achieve objectives. So we have an objective, task, resource assignment focus. And we have developed objectives and tasks for the great majority of 31 hazards that we've identified as potential hazards for the city of Carlsbad. So that's what the laptop is showing on the right, and the electronic connections we have to situational awareness resources. We've moved from paper to electronic, from individual focus to incident response focus. Next slide, please. Okay, so our laptop, desktops right now, and we're in the position of transitioning. We're in a condition of transition right now, but for the past years, since starting right before the Poinsettia fire in May of 2014, we had developed an EOC incident folder. And when you open that incident folder, next slide, John, we have on the left our current incident folder. When you open that folder, we have 31 incidents, everything from active shooters down to wildland fires with all the objectives and tasks pre-planned out for that. We have our EOC position folders and our scanned documents, our reference, and then our emergency operations plan, and then a folder with all of the electronic links and applications. Next slide, John. And so this is very complex, but this is what we've had to train to get our EOC staff from that incident folder to the identification of the incident that we're staffing to respond to, down to our pre-planned responses, which is that green spreadsheet in the bottom of the slide. And I'm not going to walk you through this, but this is the flow path to get to our objectives and tasks and all of the electronic reference material to help us with our decision making. Next slide, please. And so we, for example, for wildland fire, have 28 pre-planned objectives. We have probably close to 300 tasks associated with those objectives. Those objectives are related to scene safety and situational awareness and response support, survivor management, responder support, mutual aid, environmental management, and continuity of city operations during these hazards. Next slide, please. This is just a larger picture of that Excel spreadsheet. You can see on the left, the objective says to conduct hazard area evacuation. So this is the objective on how we evacuate the city of Carlsbad. The responsible contact is the law enforcement branch director. Law enforcement is responsible for the evacuation process in all agencies, San Diego County, statewide, nationwide. And you can see in the third column the tasks that the law enforcement branch director is responsible for completing to effect citywide evacuation. You identify the hazard area, then you identify the population that needs to be evacuated. And we have an annex that describes our process and procedures for evacuations, how we implement the traffic management cameras and those types of things. We plan for evacuating those with special needs, access and functional needs, the medically frail, the elderly. And what the law enforcement branch director is for each of these tasks, his job or her job is to make sure that we have the personnel, equipment, supplies, information, facilities, transportation, moving further to the right, it's cut off from the necessary to complete those tasks. So when we have an activation, our law enforcement branch director already knows, already been trained that his job or her job is to complete these tasks. And so they're not walking into an EOC where they're trying to figure out what's going on. If one of these tasks or objective isn't relevant for that particular fire or that particular incident, we just put an NA and move on. Next slide, please. So this is just a screenshot of what we're looking at, what we as a community were looking at during the Poinsettia fire at about 10:34 on May 14th, 2014. That dental office on the left was assisted by the chamber, and chamber members identified office space for him to move his business to. Next slide. And this was just a screenshot from the first night of the Poinsettia fire. You can kind of see what it looked like, what the staffing levels were, what our displays were, the display to, and we have added more technology. So that center map, which was a static map, has been replaced by another projection display. To the right of that is the traffic management center. But that's just a screenshot of the Emergency Operations Center from the first night of the Poinsettia fire. Next slide, please. I see I'm approaching the 30-minute mark. I'll move a little bit quicker. This, once again, is that NICS program, which was adopted by the state of California as the SCOUT application. It shows how this field level information being developed by the firefighters on the field was being shared from the field level. You can see an individual at Dove Library from Carlsbad Police Department, validating the information. It's being shared real time into the Emergency Operations Center on the right, validated by fire field observers. And once again, that picture of the fire perimeter, you can actually see how the fire perimeter was threatening the power transmission lines in Carlsbad. Next slide, please. So knowing that fire perimeter, we had an idea of which sectors of Carlsbad were hazarded and which ones needed to be evacuated. This shows how Carlsbad PD works that out. You can see in the second picture to the right, a radio to the left of law enforcement officer Mark Reno there. They're taking calls from the field. The fire's here, it's progressing in this direction. He, with a grease pencil, was drawing out that Thomas Brother grid square. Then there was some validation in the center picture. And then in the right-hand picture, you see you see an orange square, and below it, a woman with her hand up. That woman, Fiona, was actually entering those Thomas Brother grid squares into Blackboard Connect, which is the application for Alert San Diego to make these 911 style calls to the general public. And that was the electronic version of the Thomas Brother grid squares. And we did a metered evacuation, so we tried to minimize the traffic impact on our evacuation routes. And that monitor just before Fiona's hand with the picture with her risen hand is the scout picture of that fire perimeter that I showed you before. Next slide, please. And this is that traffic management picture again. This is how we monitored the evacuation flow to try and minimize choke points. We still had some choke points, but we did much better than we did in previous years when we weren't using a traffic management system. Relatively new technology at that point. Next slide, please. One thing that we all have to pay attention to, individuals and businesses, is the potential for San Diego gas and electric conducting public safety power shutoffs. Excuse me. When we have these high wind conditions, Santa Ana conditions that can trigger sparking on the electrical transmission distribution system, San Diego Gas and Electric may secure certain circuits. When they secure circuits, the power is cut off to all of the distribution fed by those circuits. And so this is a screenshot of the public safety power shutoff earlier in the year. You can see the yellow shaded areas, polygons to the right, largely East County, but we're not exempt from that. SDGE can secure Carlsbad circuits, and they have done so in past years. And when these power outages occur, these aren't 1 hour rolling flex alert power outages like we saw a couple weeks ago. These can last hours and even days before San Diego Gas and Electric restores the power. Next slide, please. During the Lilac Fire in 2017, the reason that this is in here, I want to show you that through this technology, our scope is not within the city boundaries. We can monitor the fire activity in neighboring jurisdictions throughout San Diego County. We're doing it for the Bonsall Fallbrook area. I said we were triggered to this by monitoring Tabel Command during extreme weather fire potential conditions. And as a result of this, we were able to open Carlsbad shelters to shelter these other neighboring evacuees. As a comparison point, other than the Red Cross, the city of Carlsbad is the only other jurisdiction in San Diego County that has demonstrated the ability to do independent shelter operations. We're not competing with the Red Cross, we're supplementing their capability, but we're the only jurisdiction that has opened them on 2 occasions with our own staff, resources, and facilities. Others, like City of San Diego County, often partner with the Red Cross. Next, we can do it quicker. That's why we do it this way. I'm gonna pass the next slide. This is more from the Lilac Fire. This just shows you the fire perimeter in the evacuated area. We knew from other resources within Scout that the population within that yellow zone was in 98,000 potential evacuees. We had a rule of thumb up until the Lilac Fire that we thought about 4% of the evacuated population went into shelters. That was based on previous year fire experience. It was 1.5% or 1,500 people during the Lilac Fire. Carlsbad sheltered over 250 of those. The rest went into Red Cross shelters. Next slide, please. This just shows WebEOC, how they display the shelter capabilities throughout the county and the fill rate at those shelters. Next slide, please. Oh, Carlsbad is in the list. The others were all Red Cross. Moving from, that's fine, thank you. Moving to severe weather, thunderstorms. You can see in the center picture display there a thunderstorm cell coming across the county of San Diego. We monitor this. I forgot, I meant to check her name. It's Dagmar Midcap or something. She's the redheaded weather meteorologist on one of the local news stations. We were monitoring the news. She had forecasted a tornado alert in that coastal zone identified by red. And so that was about 3 p.m. on that day. Next slide, please. And within 5 minutes of that, we had social media pictures of funnel clouds off Carlsbad's coast. So that's real-time information. That application was called Geophedia. Unfortunately, Geophedia no longer serves us purposes because there were some information sharing concerns. American Civil Liberties Union had weakened the application. They lost some of their inputs, and it's no longer a technology that we have available to us, but it was quite helpful in us understanding. We had pre-planned response. Carlsbad PD was prepared to evacuate the beaches if these funnel clouds came ashore. And we had this in minutes. It was 3 minutes. It was 5 minutes. We would have been notifying people to evacuate. Next slide, please. This is just the setup for 2 weeks ago. We had flex alerts, rolling power outages. These only lasted an hour. Next slide, please. We were monitoring the Cal ISO power availability versus power demand grid. Next slide, please. And these were the potential affected circuit areas in Carlsbad. These are general. San Diego Gas and Electric is pretty careful about how they share this information. It's protected information, but it gives us some sense of the community sectors that would have been impacted by these 1 hour flex alert power outages. Next slide, please. We're working towards the end. I'm getting to COVID-19. This is a screenshot from March of how the EOC was set up during COVID. Actually, this might have even been in February because the two of us were monitoring the CDC presentations at this slide. This was pre-staff activation condition. Next slide. On March 12th, we activated the EOC, and it's been continuously activated in some form since March 12th. You can see the spacing, social distancing. This picture was from March. Next slide, please. And we opened a second component, a conference room. Our EOC is really nothing more than a series of conference rooms separated by dividing doors. And what you see on the right-hand side is a new series of projectors that were installed in that conference room just this past year. And this is city continuity of operations monitoring. Those green and red stoplight charts are associated with each of our city essential functions. So once we started to transition from on-site staffing in the city of Carlsbad to telework and telecommuting, we wanted to make sure that we were still able to do the city's essential functions. So we had electronic versions of all of our city function monitoring. They're being displayed here. And then we had to manually update them based on department head input as to how effectively we were continuing to perform these city functions. We had 600 and some of these essential functions that we are still continuing to perform as the city was transitioning from on-site staffing to full telework. Ultimately, more than 50% of our functions were being performed by telework. The staff members at the floor of the EOC there are really our communication staff, our PIO team, working to develop a lot of the information that has been shared back through the community through various outlets over the past months. Next slide. So our EOC for COVID-19 looked like this. We had the standard EOC floor on the left, supplemented by another conference room. We were doing incident response, mitigation and response, COVID-19 mitigation response, tracking on the left-hand side, and city work, continuity of operations monitoring on the right-hand side. Next slide. So this is the last part of the presentation. It's less than 5 minutes. And I just want to say in the past 2 months, and thanks to some terrific support from other individuals on Carlsbad staff, we have started to migrate from a on-site EOC to a remote virtual EOC using Microsoft Teams. Next slide. And so we can use this in the COVID-19 environment. Next slide. We can use it in a wildland fire environment. Next slide, please. And we access our current incident folders through Teams using, as I said, we have 31 folders, everything from active shooter up in the upper left down through wildland fire in the lower right. And you can see civil unrest and climate change and cyber attacks and dam failures and drought and all of the things that we are developing or have developed objectives and pre-planned tasks for. Next slide, please. So when we open the Teams environment, for our current incident folder for this incident would be the wildland fire. You see it to the right of the red icon, and it's our first operational period. All the resources that we need to respond to that incident are available electronically anywhere, from the EOC, from home, from, as you know, you understand the Teams environment by now. But all of our objectives and tasks and resources and web links have now been migrated into this Teams environment. What will likely happen should we activate for a wildland fire this fire season, we will activate some staff in the EOC using the Teams software, and it will be supplemented by some staff working remotely in the Teams environment as well. Next slide. All of our tasks no longer look like Excel spreadsheets. You can see the objectives for the Public Works Branch Director here, for example, to something the City of Carlsbad generators, to make sure that our generators are fueled and ready to go. All the tasks are below that objective that that Public Works Branch Director would complete to complete that objective. Next slide. There's lots of advantages to incorporating Microsoft Teams into our EOC environment. Perhaps the best one is it helps us reduce our time of response. We can start making decisions immediately. As people, they don't have to travel from home into the EOC. We can do it collectively, remotely. And so this is new. We've briefed it. We are testing it. We need to exercise it and start implementing it. But this is occurring as we speak this week, next week. Next slide. We'll skip over some of the other advantages. The policy group is really the senior leadership group. They don't need to be in the EOC. They could be at City Hall. They could be at home. Next, we can incorporate lots of video, including all the drone footage in there. All the cell phones can be integrated from responders in the field. Next slide. We can include new technologies related to fire modeling. Next slide. Next slide. And so, summarizing, and with the last slide, over the past couple of years, we've really changed from paper to electronic, from position focus to incident focus, and we've moved into the Microsoft Teams environment, so we're all connected electronically, and it just kind of reminds me of that Star Trek episode about the Borg, where everyone is connected. Not there yet, don't want to really go there, but we really have improved our capability. I hope I didn't run too long. I'm happy to answer questions. Hope that was interesting.
That was excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here and for sharing all of this great information for us. Yeah, it was really, really fantastic. I know that we're going to have a bunch of questions. I have a quick question. Are you going to be able to share these slides? I just wanted to get a screenshot of that one slide that said all of the incidents you're prepared for, because
Sure.
I saw something that was like space debris. And I was like, oh, that's just like a movie.
past years, we had space debris scattered across the Southwest. And so every so often we get these calls from FEMA that there could be satellites re-entering and debris associated with that. If it's in our general area, we can attempt to monitor some of that and plan for mostly the cleanup associated with that. But I don't want to exaggerate all of the pre-planned responses. But anyway, yes.
No, I thought it was great that we're prepared for anything, and I would love a screenshot.
Quite a bit,
of that slide.
quite a bit.
So,
I look to you to keep me informed of what we need to do more, and you're the smart people. Let us know you've seen what we can do, inspire us, or give us some clues as to how we can do it even better. But I have to tell you, relatively speaking, with all the support that we've had from leadership and elected officials over the year, we are very well positioned. We're very grateful for what we have. And we've done a pretty good job of maximizing those resources. Thanks.
Let's get to the questions in the chat box. Brett asks, David, is CERT still training people during COVID times, or has it ceased for now?
Yeah, CERT, our last CERT Academy was actually number 13, but we didn't call it 13 because we didn't want to jinx anything this year. We called it CERT 2020. It started in January, it wrapped up in April, May, first week of May, because we do training over Monday nights for sick. The answer is yes, we completed electronically, and we have to decide whether we'll have a CERT Academy in January and what format it will be, but we're at the point where we need to think about that.
Great, thank you.
And
then the
CERT's
other
been
question,
very active during COVID-19. Wonderful support from our community volunteers in COVID-19 environment. And thank you, Brett, for advertising so much that in the CBJ. Really wonderful articles. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. There was another question here. This one's from Josh. Any comment on drones as first responders in Carlsbad compared with the Chula Vista PD?
Yeah, I would say that Chula Vista's program started before ours. I've been very pleased with how it's been used. I think there's still a lot of area for growth. The benefit of that real-time video in the Emergency Operations Center just better informs decision-making of city leadership. It's been used for public safety events. Drones have not been used in a wildland fire response yet, but using them to get a fire perimeter is something that we're really encouraging with fire resources. There's still work to be done there. I don't want to leave you with any misimpressions. We aren't using them comprehensively yet, but it's being discussed and worked through as how we'd be using them across all of these incidents. Yeah. Chula Vista has a very good program. Some features we don't have yet, but when you connect the drone with our mobile command vehicle and the porting of the information back to the EOC, it's a very strong capability.
Thank you. I think we have a couple of others, Ram and then John.
Yes, okay. David, that's an excellent presentation. In your first slide, you had a bunch of apps in there. So my question is that I even saw WhatsApp, and I am developing an app which is a general purpose app for specifically targeted to seniors.
Nice.
How can I incorporate whatever you're doing into my app?
I would really probably have to give that some thought, Ram. I do think right now within Carlsbad, our long-term care and residential care facilities have been communicating with the city in our emergency operations center using traditional resources, phones, and those types of things, but we've done some Zoom collaboration with them as well. I would see where you could have a WhatsApp group for these long-term care residential care facilities. There's another volunteer organization called the Residential Care for the Elderly Task Force. It's a really tremendous volunteer organization where they do collaborative planning for these assisted living facilities so that if those assisted living facilities need to evacuate, they're not evacuating to the San Diego County Fairgrounds, the Del Mar Fairgrounds next to the horses. But they're evacuating from like facility to like facility where they have beds available, so you have the medical support there. And so that work is being done by the Residential Care for the Elderly Task Force and by some of our EOC staff here, and a WhatsApp group of those. I'm glad you raised this question. Would be very useful if we did have to evacuate from like facility to like facility, because we could use WhatsApp for that communication. So I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about that. Right now, it's an app that's used by emergency managers to communicate across jurisdictions to help coordinate evacuations or what information sharing related to an incident of that. I can't say it's fully used, but it is used for some alerting and emergency management work. I think it would be very helpful, and I think it would be very well received by the assisted living community within our community, so that they can share information amongst themselves. We've seen where the larger facilities do have a lot to offer for some of the smaller bed facilities that don't have the resources.
Great. So I will connect with you. I don't know if you have your contacts in the chat yet.
Yeah, I think I did put it when I signed in. My email should be there.
Can we put it one more time? I think
I'll put
if
it in
you
right now.
joined, yeah, for anyone who joined the chat, the meeting after you put that in there, they don't see the chat from before they joined.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll type it again.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Because I think you were one of the first to be on. So great, thank you. John Beethan had a question as well.
Yes, hi, David. First of all, excellent presentation. And, I got to say for, talk about boys and girls and their toys. My goodness, the technology that's implemented here is pretty incredible. But I'm actually looking at one of the slides, and I actually have PulsePoint app installed. And I'm sitting here looking at, suicide attempt, and it gives an address. So I realize this is not your app, but I'm wondering if there's any privacy policy that's actually built into any kind of the data that actually is shared.
Yes, it's a good question. And so HIPAA concerns are at the forefront of all the information sharing, particularly during the COVID-19 environment. But there is much more information that can identify an individual in tablet command that's used by first responders. An address gets pretty close. As you know, we're not sharing addresses during COVID, but this app is used by first responders. PulsePoint is used by first responders as well, and they need that locating information, the address, for that purpose. But it's anyone can download it and get that level of information.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up PulsePoint, because when you pulled it up on the screen, I downloaded it onto my phone and was taking a look. So I can see, like, this morning there was a fire alarm, right near the chamber, right? As a citizen who has this app and is, following those sorts of things, what is our duty and our responsibility? So some of these are like, you can enable if someone needs CPR nearby, right? If someone needs CPR nearby, and like John mentioned, I don't know what the privacy concerns are, but there is an address, right? If I see an alert and I'm 100 feet away from an incident and I have had a CPR certification, are you urging citizens to take action, to try to help another citizen, to check out this, check out the situation? What sort of information is put in here that citizens would maybe need to act on? Or is this really just for monitoring? And, obviously, there's a suicide attempt. That could be a very dangerous situation that, you wouldn't necessarily want an untrained citizen, coming up on. So how should we utilize the information that we're receiving in this app as we're following, like, our local fire departments?
Really wonderful question. And so it's an app that is available largely for situational awareness, but that's not my answer, okay? My answer is for you to use your best judgment. We're all here to help others, okay? And if we have information and some training, like in CPR, to help others, I think as humans, we should act on that. Now, generally speaking, you are protected if you offer that assistance by the Good Samaritan rule that says unless you clearly act with negligence or far beyond any reasonable assumption of capability, that you would generally be protected in the help that you offer. So if you are in a position to help, I would say use your best judgment, your common sense, and offer that help until the first responders arrive. But there is no real policy statement on guidance for those who are the general public who's monitoring the PulsePoint app.
And what's the response time right now for first responders? I mean, obviously it depends on the emergency and where it is, but specifically for the city of Carlsbad, what's the average response time for first responders to an incident?
I would say it's in the neighborhood of 6 to 7 minutes.
Awesome. Well, you guys are getting there pretty fast, so.
That's what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a presentation at a council meeting about a month or so ago by a consultant who was evaluating
standards of coverage presentation, right?
The standards of coverage, yes. And he said recommendation is we might need another station and maybe a couple more units. So as we grow, you know, we have to ensure that we are covering the whole city and that we maintain those great response times.
Right. For those,
I know where I am, it's slow in the springs. My brother-in-law is graduating from the police academy today, and I was asking him about his response times, and he's like, "Well," he goes, "it really depends on what type of emergency it is. You know, if it's not a big emergency," he's like, "sometimes it could be 20 or 30 minutes. Obviously, certain things get higher priority, and the city, you know, it's got approaching 500,000 people, right? So completely kind of different, you know, demographic. I have got a family with firefighters and first responders and air ops and stuff like that. So we're always looking at what kind of information, you know, is available. My uncles are out there right now fighting, you know, a lot of fires, and we're working a lot of overtime. You know, so I'm always curious as to having people in police, fire, first respond, you know, what is our role as everyday citizens, and, you know, to participate, what do we need to be aware of, and what, you know, actions can we take to support our local communities. So it was an awesome presentation, learned a lot. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And once again, the thanks goes to our leadership and elected official who have approved the resources to achieve these results and these capabilities.
Yes, Reese, one
Quick
more question.
Thank you, David. Great presentation. Really enjoyed it. I have a question. Besides PulsePoint and then the earthquake app, what's the one app, if there's some sort of an emergency, for us to be receiving information as far as evacuation or whatever, that you would recommend we tap into? You mentioned WhatsApp, but is there one app in particular, or one something or other?
Yeah. The General Emergency Management Situational Awareness app is SD Emergency, and it was also listed on that first slide. SD Emergency is an app developed by San Diego County. It's a very good app. It connects to the San Diego County Office of Emergency Services emergency response page, and in it they will identify shelters. You'll have a routing tool from your current location to the shelter. And you'll also have a link to the City of Carlsbad and the City of Carlsbad's information. So that mobile app is very good for developing your understanding of what's happening once you've been alerted to a hazard. But one of the best ways to be alerted to a hazard is to have registered your cell phone for Alert San Diego. So you know there's no white or yellow pages for cell phones. So San Diego Sheriff's Office, Office of Emergency Services, City of Carlsbad, all the jurisdictions use Blackboard Connect, and you need to register your cell phone for that Blackboard Connect vendor, Alert San Diego, regional trademark name, not trademark, but regional name. And the only way to do it is by going to readysandiego.org, Ready San Diego, all one word, .org. When you go to that, on the left-hand side of the webpage, you'll see a template for registering for Alert San Diego. Please put your cell phone numbers in that, because you get the most precise hazard information in terms of broadcast calls to your cell phone that way. But over the past couple of years, starting in 2017, starting with the first call during the Lilac Fire, there's a second application that's called a Wireless Emergency Alert. Clunky acronym, WEA. It was used during the Lilac Fire one time. The calls went to all cell phones because the calls didn't go to a identified phone number that's been registered, but goes to the cell phone towers in the region. And then the messages start communicating between cell phone towers. And so in 2017, the Lilac Fire information broadcast throughout San Diego County. It went into Orange County, San Bernardino County, because there was a bleed over between cell phone towers. That technology has improved in the past 3 years. If you think of a Thomas Brother grid square right now, it's precise to 0.1 mile around that Thomas Brother grid square. Okay, so you can make it much more targeted to who your selected audience to receive it is. It's been proven to be effective during the Valley Fire just this year. You'll see more of these types of calls. As a matter of fact, if not all of you got one of these wireless emergency alerts, they're kind of like Amber Alerts, last Saturday during the Valley Fire, because the first one that was launched, there was some operator error involved and it went to the whole county instead of just the targeted area. But after that first one, all the subsequent ones went to the intended area. That's WEA. You don't have to register for it. You can just anticipate and get it, but you do have to register for Alert San Diego. The best app is SD Emergency.
Reese, there is another app coming up next year, Chats to See.
Thanks for your answer, David.
That's
no,
Ron's
Chats
app.
to See. It's
Okay.
my app.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing it. And I don't mean to say that SD Emergency is the only app. There's Quake Alert apps and there's incident-specific apps. You guys are smart. You can identify those. And they're fun and they're informative. And I look forward to seeing yours around.
Great. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your excellent work on behalf of our community and for staying in touch with us and with the Chamber, because I think it's really important that we, as another important part of the community, know what's happening and learn as much as we can. And we are interested and we do want to stay engaged. So thank you very much for everything that you do.
Thank you for the opportunity to share the information. Thanks to Brett and his staff. There's another subcommittee, Ready Carlsbad, and we've had such a great opportunity to share information through that resource. And that resource helps community recovery. And this year with COVID-19, through Brett's leadership, we've been able to help with the gift card program. Back in 2014, we helped with the 71 families that have been impacted through cash donations, card donations, those types of things. So thank you for the compliment, but thank you, Brett, for continuing the Chamber's leadership in community preparedness, business preparedness as well.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks again. I know we're all very happy to have you.
Morning, everybody. Great presentation, David. Thank you so much. We're truly blessed to have not only an engaged emergency operations center, but such a communication and relationship back between us as a chamber and the community with you guys. So we really appreciate that. And as you mentioned, those of you that really like this stuff, we would encourage you to check out our Ready Carlsbad Business Alliance Committee that meets monthly. David, is it the second Friday of the month? Does that sound right? Yes.
It does, second Friday of the month.
Yeah, second Friday of the month, same time as we're meeting here today, 7:30 to 9. And they do some great work.